The rain hammered against the windshield like bullets as I watched the silver Aston Martin sputter to a stop on the shoulder of Highway 95. Steam poured from under its hood, and through my shop's tow truck windows, I could see a woman in an expensive suit frantically trying to restart the engine. This stretch of road was notorious for carjackings after dark, and here she was, stranded at 11 p.m. with what looked like a blown gasket. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I grabbed my emergency toolkit and jogged through the downpour toward her car. What I saw when she rolled down the window made me pause. This wasn't just any breakdown. The engine bay showed signs of deliberate sabotage, coolant lines that had been carefully nicked to fail under pressure, creating a cascading system failure that would strand someone miles from help. Someone had wanted this woman vulnerable on this particular stretch of road tonight. My mind immediately shifted into the analytical mode I hadn't used in 5 years, calculating failure points and emergency solutions with the precision that had once made me the youngest head engineer in Meridian Racing's history. 3 minutes to get her mobile again before the situation became dangerous. I could do this. The woman who stepped out of the Aston Martin was nothing like the usual customers who found their way to Rivera's auto repair. Her charcoal business suit was perfectly tailored despite the chaos, her red hair pulled back in a style that spoke of boardrooms and power lunches. But it was her eyes that caught my attention, sharp, intelligent, and currently calculating whether to trust the grease-stained mechanic who'd appeared out of the storm. "Ma'am, I'm Diego Rivera from the shop about 2 miles back," I said, raising my voice over the rain. "Your car's been sabotaged. We need to get you moving now or call police." She studied me for a moment, taking in my soaked work shirt and the confidence in my voice that didn't match my humble appearance. "Sabotaged? That's impossible. This car was serviced by the best technicians money can buy." I popped the hood and directed her phone's flashlight toward the evidence. "See these cuts in the coolant lines? They're precise, designed to fail under highway pressure. Someone wanted you stranded here tonight." As I spoke, my hands were already working, bypassing damaged systems with temporary solutions I'd learned during late-night race prep sessions where failure meant losing million-dollar contracts. Within minutes, I'd rerouted the cooling system using spare hoses from my truck, created a temporary seal with industrial adhesive, and recalibrated the engine management system through the diagnostic port. The Aston Martin purged to life, its V12 settling into the smooth idle that cost more than most people's annual salary. The woman stared at me with undisguised amazement. "How did you do that?" "My technician said this model requires specialized equipment for any major repairs." I shrugged, closing the hood. "Sometimes experience matters more than equipment. Follow me back to my shop. That fix will get you there, but you'll need permanent repairs." As we drove through the rain, I caught glimpses of her in my rearview mirror, talking animatedly on her phone. By the time we reached Rivera's auto repair, she'd made what sounded like a dozen calls, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to giving orders that moved mountains. My shop wasn't much to look at a converted gas station from. The 1960s with 2 service bays and an office that doubled as my daughter Sophia's homework space. But it was clean, organized, and filled with tools that could handle anything from a 1995 Honda Civic to the exotic machinery now cooling in Bay 1. "Mr. Rivera," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Elena Castillo, CEO of Apex Automotive Group." I nearly dropped my wrench. Apex Automotive Group owned half the luxury car brands in the world, controlled racing circuits across 3 continents, and had recently acquired 2 of the major Formula One teams. Elena Castillo was automotive royalty, a woman whose business decisions affected millions of jobs worldwide. "Just Diego is fine," I managed. wondering what cosmic joke had landed the most powerful woman in the automotive industry in my small-town shop. Elena walked around my workspace, her expert eye taking in details that most customers missed. She paused at my tool cabinet, running her fingers over precision instruments that were far more expensive and sophisticated than anything typically found in a neighborhood garage. "These are professional racing tools," she observed. "Meridian Racing, Silverstone specifications. You don't acquire equipment like this by accident." I focused on the diagnostic computer, pulling up the Aston Martin system reports. "I've worked on a few race cars over the years. A few race cars." Her tone suggested she knew there was more to that story. "Mr. Rivera, I've been in this industry for 15 years. I know talent when I see it. What you did tonight, the speed and precision of that repair, that's not the work of someone who's worked on a few race cars." Before I could deflect further, the shop door chimed and Sophia burst in, shaking rain from her bright yellow raincoat. At 9 years old, she possessed her mother's curious nature and an intelligence that sometimes startled me with its clarity. "Papa, you're working late again," she said, then noticed Elena. "Oh, sorry, I didn't know you had a customer." Elena's stern business expression softened completely. "And who is this beautiful young lady?" "I'm Sophia Rivera," my daughter announced, with the confidence of a child who'd grown up around adults. "Are you here about the fancy car? It sounds really expensive when it runs." Elena laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it did me. "It is expensive. But your father fixed it like it was no big deal. He must be very talented." Sophia beamed with pride. "Papa can fix anything. He taught me how to change oil and check tire pressure, and sometimes he lets me help with the computer diagnostics. Mama used to say he had magic hands." The mention of my late wife, Isabella, brought the familiar tightness to my chest. Sophia had only been 5 when we lost her to cancer, and for the past 4 years, it had been just the two of us, navigating life together. She was the reason. I left the high-octane world of professional racing for this quieter existence. Elena seemed to sense the weight behind Sophia's words. "Your mama sounds like a very smart woman," she said gently. "She was a nurse," Sophia replied matter-of-factly. "She helped sick people get better, and Papa helps broken cars get better. They both fix things that are important to people." After Sophia settled into the office with her tablet and homework, Elena and I returned to discussing her car. The temporary fixes would hold, but it was clear someone with intimate knowledge of her vehicle had deliberately sabotaged it. "Do you have any idea who might have wanted to strand you out there tonight?" I asked while running diagnostics on systems no amateur should have accessed. Elena's expression hardened. "The auto industry isn't exactly civil. Apex is in the middle of several major acquisitions. A lot of people would benefit from me missing tomorrow's board meeting." As I worked, she handled calls, rescheduled meetings, and tightened security protocols with practiced efficiency. But I noticed the subtle shake of her hands when she thought no one was looking, the fatigue around her eyes betraying the toll. "Miss Castillo," I said, "your car will be ready by morning, but you need someone to inspect your entire fleet. This kind of tampering suggests an inside job." She paused mid-call, her eyes narrowing as she studied me. "Are you offering your services?" The question hung between us, heavy with meaning. Here was a woman who could buy the town and barely feel it, and she was asking me for help. "I'm offering to make sure you get home safe," I replied. "Beyond that, you'll need more than I can offer." She watched Sophia quietly sorting tools with precision, then turned back to me. "May I ask something personal?" I nodded. "Still working. What made you walk away from racing?" "Because I looked you up. Diego Rivera, engineering mastermind behind 3 championship seasons, until you disappeared 5 years ago." I'd known that question was coming. Elena Castillo didn't get where she was by ignoring the obvious. Family became more important, I said. When Isabella got sick, the trophies didn't matter. After she passed, Sophia needed stability more than I needed success. Elena nodded slowly. And now you fix neighborhood cars and raise your daughter. That's right. After a moment, she said something that shifted everything. What if I told you I need someone I can trust, someone like you, who knows engines and sabotage but also understands family? I met her gaze. Depends what you're asking. For the first time since her car broke down, Elena smiled genuinely. I'm asking if you'd consult for Apex. Part-time, flexible, remote when needed. I need help identifying sabotage and protecting what I've built. The offer hung between us, a bridge between the life I'd chosen and the world I'd left behind. Sophia looked up from her homework. Papa, is the lady giving you a job? I knelt beside her. She's asking me to help with car problems, but it might change things. Sophia thought hard. Would it help her? Yes. Then you should do it. Mama said helping people is the most important job. I looked back at Elena, who was watching us with a look I couldn't quite name. If I say yes, I have conditions. Sophia comes first, always. I work around her schedule, and nothing you ask can ever put her in danger. Elena extended her hand this time, not just as a CEO. I wouldn't have it any other way. Welcome to Apex Automotive, Diego. As I shook her hand, I knew this was more than a consulting job. But with Sophia's proud smile and Elena's hopeful gaze, I thought maybe this was the start of something new for all of us. The next morning, Rivera's auto repair saw a subtle transformation. At 7 a.m. sharp, Elena arrived in a sleek black Range Rover, her repaired Aston Martin following close behind, driven by a technician. Dressed in jeans and a crisp white blouse, she looked less like the power-suited executive from the night before, and more like someone ready to get to work. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sophia was eating cereal at the office desk when Elena walked in, carrying 2 coffee cups and a bag from the bakery down the street. Good morning, Sophia. I brought you a chocolate croissant, if that's okay with your papa. My daughter's eyes lit up as she accepted the pastry. Thank you, Ms. Elena. Papa usually makes me oatmeal, but this is much better. I shot Sophia a look that made her giggle, then accepted the coffee Elena offered. You didn't have to do this. Consider it a consulting fee advance, Elena replied, settling into the chair across from my desk. I've been thinking about our conversation last night. The sabotage on my vehicle was sophisticated, but it was also personal. Someone wanted me stranded on that specific stretch of highway. Over the next hour, as Sophia finished breakfast and gathered her school supplies, Elena outlined the scope of what she was dealing with. Apex Automotive Group was in the final stages of acquiring Meridian Racing, the same team I'd worked for years ago. The acquisition would give Apex control over advanced racing technologies that could revolutionize consumer vehicles. The deal closes next Friday, Elena explained. But in the past month, there have been 3 separate incidents. My head of engineering's car caught fire in the company parking lot. Our lead designer's brakes failed on the way to a crucial meeting. And now this. I walked Sophia to the school bus stop, my mind processing the pattern Elena had described. When I returned, she was examining the diagnostic equipment in my shop with professional interest. Diego, this setup is remarkable. You have access to proprietary racing systems that most manufacturers don't even know exist. I kept some connections when I left the circuit, I admitted. Old habits. Elena turned to face me directly. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Your departure from Meridian Racing was abrupt. The official story was family obligations, but there were rumors about a disagreement with management over safety protocols. The question cut straight to the heart of secrets I'd buried along with my racing career. I'd known this conversation would come eventually, but facing Elena's penetrating gaze made it impossible to deflect. "There was an incident during the Monaco Grand Prix weekend," I said finally. "I discovered that the team owner, Marcus Webb, had been cutting corners on safety equipment to maximize profit margins. When drivers started reporting handling issues that could have killed them, I confronted him. He told me to keep quiet or find another job." Elena nodded slowly. "So you chose to leave rather than compromise your ethics?" "I chose to leave rather than watch drivers die for the sake of Webb's profit margins," I corrected. 2 weeks. After I quit, there was a crash during qualifying that hospitalized 3 drivers. The investigation found exactly the safety violations I'd tried to report. And Marcus Webb sold his stake in Meridian Racing and disappeared into a web of shell companies and offshore investments. Last I heard, he was trying to rebuild his reputation through various automotive ventures. Elena's expression shifted from curiosity to sharp concern. "Diego, Marcus Webb is one of the potential bidders trying to block our acquisition of Meridian Racing. If he can't win the bidding war, sabotaging key Apex personnel would be exactly the kind of underhanded tactic he'd employ." The pieces clicked into place with uncomfortable clarity. Webb had the motive, the resources, and the complete lack of ethics necessary to orchestrate the attacks Elena had described. But proving it would require getting close to people and systems I'd spent 5 years avoiding. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Elena smiled, but it was the predatory expression of a CEO who'd identified her target. "I need you to help me set a trap. But first, I want to show you something." An hour later, we were driving through the industrial district in Elena's Range Rover. Sophia's safely at school, and Mrs. Gonzalez from next door keeping an eye on the shop. Elena pulled into the parking lot of a massive facility that looked more like a space program complex than an automotive plant. "Welcome to Apex Advanced Development," she said as we walked toward the main entrance. "This is where we design the future of transportation." The security checkpoint recognized Elena immediately, but I had to submit to biometric scanning and background verification before receiving a visitor badge. As we walked through corridors lined with concept vehicles that looked like they'd driven out of science fiction movies, Elena explained her vision for the company. "Most people think the automotive industry is about making cars go faster or look prettier," she said, pausing beside a sleek electric prototype. "But what we're really doing is reimagining how humans interact with their environment. Autonomous systems that prevent accidents before they happen. Energy storage that could power entire neighborhoods. Transportation networks that eliminate traffic forever." We entered an elevator that required Elena's biometric authorization, rising to a floor that didn't appear on the building directory. When the doors opened, I stepped into a workshop that made my well-equipped garage look like a child's toy box. "This is our Black Projects division," Elena said. "Everything you see here is classified at the highest levels. We're not just acquiring Meridian Racing for their current technology. We're after their quantum computing research that could revolutionize vehicle artificial intelligence." In the center of the workshop sat a vehicle unlike anything I'd ever seen. It looked like a Formula One car that had been redesigned by alien engineers, with curves and angles that seemed to defy physics. "This is Project Hermes," Elena explained. "The world's first fully autonomous racing vehicle." The logic was sound, but it also meant that Elena Castillo, CEO of a global automotive empire, had included my 9-year-old daughter in the category of people she cared about protecting. The realization sent my carefully constructed emotional walls tumbling in ways I wasn't prepared to handle. That evening, as I adjusted the tie Elena had insisted I wear to blend in at the gala, Sophia emerged from Mrs. Gonzalez's apartment wearing a navy blue dress that made her look impossibly grown up. "Do I look fancy enough for Miss Elena's party, Papa?" "You look perfect, sweetheart," I said, meaning every word. But as we drove toward the hotel where the gala was being held, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would irrevocably change the careful balance I'd maintained between protecting my daughter and allowing myself to care about someone else. Again, Elena met us in the hotel lobby, stunning in a red evening gown that commanded attention from every person in the room. But her genuine smile when she saw Sophia told me everything I needed to know about where her priorities truly lay. "You both look wonderful," she said, then knelt to Sophia's eye level. "Sophia, tonight is going to be a grown-up party with lots of talking about car business. Are you okay with staying close to Papa and me?" Sophia nodded solemnly. "Papa explained that some people might not want your company to succeed. I promise to be very good and pay attention to everything." Elena's expression shifted to one of admiration mixed with concern. "She's remarkable, Diego, but are you sure about bringing her into this?" I looked at my daughter, seeing Isabella's determination in her young face, and made a decision that would define the rest of our lives. She's stronger than she looks. And you're right about keeping the people we care about close tonight. As we entered the ballroom together, Elena's hand briefly touching mine while Sophia walked between us, I realized that Marcus Webb's campaign of intimidation had accomplished something he never intended. It had forced three people from completely different worlds to become a family worth fighting for. The Meridian Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the quiet power of automotive industry royalty. Sophia stayed close to my side, her eyes wide as she took in the elaborate displays of concept vehicles and the formally dressed crowd that controlled billions in global transportation wealth. Elena moved through the gathering with practiced grace, introducing us as her consulting engineer and his daughter, a cover story that allowed me to observe without drawing unwanted attention. Marcus Webb arrived fashionably late, making an entrance, designed to remind everyone of his former influence in the racing world. At 55, he retained the commanding presence that had once made him a feared negotiator, his silver hair and expensive tuxedo projecting success. Despite the scandals that had driven him from Formula One, he worked the room systematically, greeting old contacts and potential allies with the calculated charm of a predator assessing prey. I watched him from across the room, cataloging mannerisms and behavioral patterns that might reveal his connection to the recent attacks on Elena's team. What struck me immediately was how comfortable he seemed, showing none of the tension I'd expect from someone orchestrating a campaign of corporate sabotage. Elena appeared beside me, champagne flute in hand, playing her role as the gracious hostess while conducting reconnaissance. "He's been talking to 3 members of my acquisition team in the past hour," she murmured. "But the conversations look completely normal from here." Sophia tugged on my sleeve, pointing toward a display of vintage racing cars near the ballroom's entrance. "Papa, can we look at the old cars? That red one looks like the pictures Mama kept of you racing." The innocent request sent a chill through me. Isabella had indeed kept photographs from my racing days, images I'd packed away after her death, because they reminded me of a life that no longer mattered. But Sophia's comment had been loud enough for several nearby guests to overhear, including Dr. Sarah Chun, Elena's head of research and development. Dr. Chun turned toward us with sudden interest, her analytical mind clearly processing new information. "Rivera," she said slowly. "Diego Rivera. You're the engineer who designed the aerodynamic systems that dominated the championship seasons 5 years ago." The recognition I'd hoped to avoid was spreading through conversations around us like ripples in a pond. Within minutes I found myself surrounded by industry veterans who remembered my work, their questions probing deeper into why I'd disappeared from racing and what I was doing at an Apex Automotive event. Elena stepped smoothly into the group, redirecting attention with the skill of an experienced executive. "Diego has been consulting with us on advanced propulsion systems," she said, the explanation vague enough to satisfy curiosity without revealing classified information, but the damage was done. Across the room, Marcus Webb had noticed the commotion around me, his expression shifting from polite interest to sharp recognition. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw the calculation in his gaze as he processed my presence at Elena's side. The evening's keynote presentation provided temporary respite from unwanted attention. Elena took the podium to discuss Apex's commitment to automotive safety research, her speech highlighting innovations that could prevent the kind of accidents that claimed thousands of lives annually. Sophia listened with rapt attention, occasionally whispering questions about technical concepts that most adults would struggle to understand. During the presentation, I noticed Marcus Webb slip out of the ballroom, followed moments later by Dr. Chun. My instincts, dormant for years but never fully silenced, screamed warnings that something was wrong. "Elena," I whispered as she concluded, her remarks to enthusiastic applause. "Webb and Dr. Chun just left together. That's not a coincidence." Elena's composed expression never wavered, but I caught the flash of understanding in her eyes. "Take Sophia to the lobby and wait for me there," she said quietly. "I'm going to follow them." "Absolutely not," I replied immediately. If Webb is behind the attacks, confronting him alone is exactly what he wants. "Diego, this is my company and my responsibility, and Sophia is my daughter. I'm not letting you walk into danger while she's here." The argument was resolved by Sophia herself, who had been listening with the focused attention she applied to all adult conversations. "Ms. Elena, why don't you and Papa both go? I can wait with Mrs. Patterson from the Children's Education Foundation. She's been talking to me about science programs, and she seems very nice. It uses quantum processors to analyze track conditions, weather patterns, and competitor behavior in real time, making tactical decisions faster than any human driver could process." I walked around the vehicle, my engineering mind cataloging innovations that were years ahead of anything currently in production. The propulsion system alone represented breakthroughs that would transform the entire industry. "Elena, this technology would be worth billions to any company that controlled it," she finished. "Now you understand why someone like Marcus Webb would go to extreme lengths to either acquire it or destroy it." We spent the next 3 hours going through security footage from the incidents Elena had described, analyzing the sabotage methods with the same systematic approach I'd once applied to solving aerodynamic problems. The pattern that emerged was both sophisticated and personal. "Whoever is doing this knows Apex's operations intimately," I concluded. "They understand our security protocols, vehicle maintenance schedules, and personal routines. This isn't an outside attack. Someone inside the company is feeding information to Webb." Elena leaned back in her chair, the weight of betrayal evident in her expression. "The acquisition team consists of 5 people, including myself. Any one of them would have access to the information needed to coordinate these attacks. We need to identify the leak without alerting them that we're investigating," I said. "Can you create a situation where each team member receives different information, so we can trace which details make it back to Webb?" Elena's smile returned, sharp and calculating. "I have something better in mind. Tomorrow night, Apex is hosting a charity gala for automotive safety research. All the major industry players will be there, including Marcus Webb. It's the perfect opportunity to observe interactions and see who's passing information." That evening, as I helped Sophia with her math homework, she looked up from her fraction problems with the serious expression she inherited from her mother. "Papa, is your new job dangerous?" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because you had that look today. The one you get when you're worried about keeping us safe." I set down my pen, giving Sophia my full attention. She was too perceptive for her own good sometimes, reading emotions in adults that they tried to hide. "There might be some people who don't want Ms. Elena's company to succeed," I said carefully. But Papa's job is just to help her figure out car problems, like fixing engines. Sophia considered this, then nodded. Like when you fixed her fancy car last night. Exactly like that. Papa, do you like Ms. Elena? The innocent question hit me with unexpected force. Did I like Elena Castillo? She was brilliant, driven, and completely dedicated to her vision of transforming transportation. She treated Sophia with genuine warmth and had shown me a respect for my skills that I hadn't experienced in years. But she also lived in a world of corporate warfare and billion-dollar deals, while I'd chosen the simple life of a neighborhood mechanic. She's a good person who needs help, I said finally. And helping good people is always the right thing to do. Sophia nodded sagely, then returned to her fractions. But I caught her smiling to herself, as if she'd heard more in my answer than I'd intended to reveal. The next morning brought disturbing news. Elena called at 6 a.m., her voice tight with controlled anger. Diego, there's been another incident. My head of security found explosive devices attached to the undercarriage of 3 vehicles in the executive parking garage. The bomb squad is there now. I was at the Apex facility within 20 minutes, leaving Sophia with Mrs. Gonzalez and a promise to call every hour. The parking garage was cordoned off, but Elena's security clearance got us close enough to observe the investigation. The devices were sophisticated but not armed, the bomb squad leader reported. Designed to be discovered. More psychological warfare than actual assassination attempt. Elena and I exchanged glances. This escalation suggested that Webb was getting desperate, willing to cross lines that even he had previously avoided. The charity gala is tonight, Elena said quietly. If Webb is behind this, he'll want to be there to gauge the impact of his intimidation tactics. Or to cover his tracks by appearing completely innocent, I replied. Either way, we need to be ready for anything. That afternoon, as I picked up Sophia from school, she surprised me with an announcement that changed everything. Papa, Ms. Elena called the school. She invited me to come with you tonight to her fancy party. Mrs. Gonzalez said she could help me get ready. I stared at my daughter, processing the implications. Elena had involved Sophia in what could potentially be a dangerous investigation, crossing a line I'd specifically asked her not to cross. But when I called Elena to confront her about it, her explanation gave me pause. Diego, I've been thinking about what you said regarding family coming first. If someone is willing to plant explosives to intimidate me, they might escalate to targeting the people I care about. I'd rather have Sophia where we can protect her than leave her somewhere Webb's people might consider a vulnerability. Elena and I shared a glance, both of us silently recognizing the truth in my daughter's suggestion. Mrs. Patterson, a trusted educator whose foundation collaborated with Apex on STEM outreach, would indeed be a safe presence in the lobby, and it would be busy all evening. I crouched in front of Sophia, leveling my voice. Stay where Mrs. Patterson can always see you. If anything feels off, find hotel security right away. I will, Papa. Now go help Ms. Elena catch the bad guys. She replied with calm certainty. With no time to waste, Elena and I moved quickly through the hotel's corridors, following logic and instinct toward wherever private conversations might take place. We found them on the mezzanine in a small conference room with its door slightly ajar, just enough for voices to slip through. The timeline has been pushed up, said Dr. Chun, voice tight. Rivera's involvement changes everything. If he's working with Elena, he'll recognize the quantum processor alterations immediately. Then came the unmistakable voice of Marcus Webb, as cold and calculating as ever. Then we proceed to the final phase. The Meridian acquisition vote is Monday. Elena must be removed, or at the very least, discredited before then. Elena stiffened beside me, stunned. Betrayal hit her like a punch. Dr. Chun, her trusted head of R&D, was actively helping their biggest rival. The explosive devices. We're meant to scare her, Webb continued smoothly. But if Rivera's involved, we don't have the luxury of subtlety. They both need to be eliminated. I pulled Elena gently away from the door, my brain rapidly evaluating every tactical move available, instincts from another life kicking in hard. Webb was no longer talking about sabotage, he was planning murder, with help from someone inside. Elena's own company. We need to get to Sofia and leave. Now, I whispered urgently. Then call in the feds people who handle industrial crime and national security. Elena nodded, but before we could move, Dr. Chun's next words stopped us cold. And what about the girl? Rivera's daughter asked some very sharp questions about the quantum processor displays. If she tells someone what she saw, the implication struck me like a hammer to the chest. In a heartbeat, the careful shell I'd built around my violent past shattered. The patient mechanic vanished, and in his place stood the man I used to be, the one who specialized in solving problems with decisive force. I pushed the conference room door open, stepping inside with a presence that turned both conspirators rigid. You just made a fatal mistake, I said, voice low and dangerous. Dr. Chun went pale immediately. Threatening my daughter is a line you never should have crossed. Webb straightened, still exuding that smug arrogance I remembered. Diego Rivera, the idealist who gave up millions because he couldn't stomach reality. Still pretending to be a hero, I see. Still willing to kill to win, I snapped, stepping closer. But this time, you threatened my child, and that makes you mine. Elena came to stand beside me, radiating the authority of a CEO who had nothing left to lose. Dr. Chun, you're done. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from this building, and federal investigators will go through every single file you've touched this year. Dr. Chun's gaze flicked between Elena and Webb, understanding dawning in her expression. Marcus, you said it would be clean. You said no one would get hurt. Webb's expression turned icy. The situation changed, Sarah. Sacrifices are sometimes necessary for progress. That cold dismissal of human life, of my daughter's life, flipped a switch in me I hadn't touched in years. Elena, call security. Have them check on Sofia right now. Webb and I need to finish something. She nodded and reached for her phone, but I was already moving. Webb reached into his jacket, probably for a weapon or a comms device, but I was faster. I locked his arm with trained precision, dropped him to his knees, and moved smoothly to restrain both him and Dr. Chun, using techniques I hadn't needed in years, but still remembered perfectly. The entire takedown was over in less than 30 seconds, leaving both traitors immobilized and Elena looking at me with a mix of awe and alarm. Diego ... Where did you learn how to do that? She asked. I didn't meet her eyes as I continued. Securing Webb. There's a part of my life I haven't talked about. Before racing, I served in special operations. My engineering career came afterward, but my teams knew what I could do off the track. She processed this, phone still, to her ear, face shifting from shock to understanding and maybe something else, trust. Security arrived within minutes, followed closely by federal agents who, it turned out, had already been monitoring the situation, waiting for probable cause. The moment Webb and Chun were in custody, the whole web of corruption began to unravel. Faced with federal charges and the end of her career, Dr. Chun broke quickly, detailing a long campaign of industrial sabotage, bribery, and espionage. Webb had been systematically stealing Apex's quantum computing research, while sabotaging key personnel to create chaos that would drive down the company's valuation before the Meridian Racing acquisition. The federal investigation revealed a network of corporate corruption extending far beyond Elena's company, involving securities fraud, industrial sabotage, and the attempted manipulation of multiple automotive industry mergers. Webb's arrest made headlines across the business world, sending shockwaves through an industry that had tolerated his unethical practices for too long. But for me, the most important moment came when we returned to the hotel lobby to find Sophia safe with Mrs. Patterson, completely unaware of the danger that had threatened her. She looked up from a tablet displaying holographic engine schematics, her face bright with excitement. "Papa, Ms. Elena, look what Mrs. Patterson showed me. These are the new motors that don't need gasoline at all. She says girls can be engineers too, just like you, Papa." Elena knelt beside Sophia, her composed, executive mask replaced by genuine warmth. "Sophia, girls can be anything they want to be. Engineers, CEOs, race car drivers, anything at all. Could I work for your company someday?" Sophia asked with the serious consideration she applied to all life decisions. "I think," Elena replied, glancing at me with a smile that made my heart skip, "that your family might already be working for my company, if that's something you'd both like." 3 months later, the acquisition of Meridian Racing was completed successfully, with Diego Rivera officially listed as Apex Automotive Group's Director of Advanced Engineering Systems. The position allowed me to work on cutting-edge technology, while maintaining the flexible schedule that kept Sophia's needs as my top priority. Elena had the quantum computing research laboratory relocated to a facility just outside our town, making it possible for me to contribute to revolutionary transportation technologies without uprooting the stable life I'd built for my daughter. Sophia thrived in the new arrangement, participating in Apex's youth education programs while maintaining her friendships and familiar routines. On a warm Saturday morning, as I watched Sophia help Elena plant flowers in the garden behind our house, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed. Elena had become a fixture in our daily routine, sharing dinner with us several evenings a week and including Sophia in weekend activities that ranged from go-kart racing to museum visits. "Papa," Sophia called from where she was explaining soil chemistry to Elena with the enthusiasm of a natural teacher, "When are you going to ask Ms. Elena to marry us?" The question, delivered with my daughter's trademark directness, made Elena burst into laughter while I nearly choked on my coffee. "Sophia Maria Rivera," I managed. "That's not how these things work." "Why not?" She replied with unassailable 9-year-old logic. "You love her, she loves you, and she already acts like my bonus mama. Mrs. Gonzalez says you're both too stubborn to admit what everyone else can see." Elena wiped dirt from her hands, still laughing, then walked over to sit beside me on the porch steps. "You know, Diego, your daughter makes some very compelling arguments." "She gets that from her mother," I replied, watching Sophia return to her gardening with the satisfaction of someone who had made an important point. "The thing is," Elena continued, her voice softer now, "Sophia's not wrong about how I feel. Somewhere between that first night when you fixed my car and this morning when she taught me the proper way to plant marigolds, I fell in love with both of you." I set down my coffee cup, turning to face the woman who had transformed our quiet life into something richer and more complex than I'd ever imagined possible. "Elena Castillo, are you proposing to me?" "I'm proposing that we stop pretending this is just about consulting contracts and start acknowledging that we've become a family." Sophia looked up from her flowers, dirt smudged on her cheek and pride shining in her eyes. "See, Papa? I told you Ms. Elena was smart." 6 months later, at a small ceremony in the same garden where Sophia had orchestrated our confession of feelings, Elena Castillo became Elena Rivera, CEO of Apex Automotive Group and stepmother to the most perceptive 9-year-old in automotive engineering history. The wedding reception was held at Rivera's Auto Repair, transformed for the evening into an elegant celebration space that somehow perfectly represented the blending of our two worlds. Racing legends mingled with neighborhood mechanics, corporate executives shared stories with elementary school teachers, and Sophia served as both flower girl and unofficial technical consultant to anyone interested in the quantum propulsion systems powering Apex's latest concept vehicles. As I danced with my new wife while Sophia spun with Mrs. Gonzalez nearby, I marveled at the unexpected path that had brought us together. A broken-down Aston Martin on a rainy highway had introduced me to a woman whose brilliant mind and generous heart had rebuilt our family in ways I'd never thought possible. No regrets about marrying a small-town mechanic? I asked Elena as the evening wound down. She smiled, the expression radiating the contentment of someone who had found exactly what she was looking for. Diego Rivera, you're many things, but a small-town mechanic isn't one of them anymore. You're a world-class engineer, an incredible father, and the love of my life. Plus, you can fix my car when it breaks down. Sophia appeared beside us, yawning but determined to stay awake for every moment of the celebration. Papa, Ms. Elena, Mama Elena, when do I get to help design the flying cars? Elena and I exchanged glances, both recognizing that our daughter's curiosity and intelligence would probably lead to innovations neither of us could currently imagine. Soon, sweetheart, Elena replied, lifting Sophia into a three-way hug that encompassed our new family. Very soon. As the last guests departed and we stood together in the garage that had become the foundation of our unexpected love story, I realized that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simple decision to help someone in need. What started as a roadside repair had evolved into a life neither Elena nor I could have planned, but both of us were grateful to discover. The future stretched ahead of us, filled with quantum computers and racing innovations, family dinners, and school projects, corporate challenges, and neighborhood gatherings. But most importantly, it was a future we would navigate together, three people who had found in each other the missing pieces that made them whole. 2 years had transformed our lives in ways that still surprised me every morning when I woke up in the elegant townhouse Elena had insisted we move into after the wedding. Sophia, now 11 and showing signs of the brilliant engineer she was destined to become, had converted the spare bedroom into a workshop where she built prototypes of transportation devices that defied conventional thinking. This particular morning, she was testing a magnetic levitation system for her science fair project, much to the concern of our neighbors who occasionally heard unusual humming sounds from our house. Elena emerged from her home office, already dressed for the day in a sharp navy suit, her phone pressed to her ear as she managed what sounded like a crisis involving their new facility in Germany. The sight of her commanding a multinational corporation while simultaneously making sure Sophia had packed her lunch never failed to amaze me. Diego, we have a situation, she said after ending her call. The European Union is launching an investigation into our quantum computing patents. Someone has convinced them that our technology violates international guidelines for artificial intelligence development. I looked up from calibrating Sophia's levitation device, my engineering mind immediately shifting to problem-solving mode. Who would have the influence to trigger that kind of investigation? That's what we need to find out. The timing is suspicious, coming just as we're about to announce the Hermes autonomous racing system publicly. Someone wants to derail our launch. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her school backpack slung over one shoulder, and her tablet displaying complex mathematical equations in the other hand. Are you talking about the mean people who don't want Mama Elena's cars to be better than everyone else's? Elena smiled at Sophia's simplified but accurate assessment. Something like that, sweetheart. But don't worry, Papa and I will figure it out. Can I help? Sophia asked with the earnest determination that reminded me so much of Isabella. I've been studying international patent law for my debate class, and I think I understand how people try to steal other people's inventions. The casual mention of patent law study by an 11-year-old would have surprised me 2 years ago, but Sophia's intellectual curiosity had only intensified since Elena entered our lives. Having a stepmother who encouraged questions about quantum physics and corporate strategy had accelerated my daughter's development in directions I never could have anticipated. At Apex's headquarters, the crisis management team had assembled. In the main conference room, their faces reflecting the seriousness of the European investigation. Elena took her place at the head of the table with the natural authority that had made her one of the youngest CEOs in automotive history, while I settled into the role of technical consultant that allowed me to contribute without being thrust into the spotlight I still preferred to avoid. The EU investigation focuses on 3 specific patents, reported James Morrison, Elena's new head of legal affairs, a man whose careful attention to detail had helped rebuild trust after Dr. Chun's betrayal. They claim our quantum processors could be used to create autonomous weapon systems, violating international agreements on artificial intelligence warfare applications. I studied the patent documents Morrison distributed, my mind analyzing the technical specifications with the systematic approach that had once made me valuable to racing teams. These patents are specifically designed for civilian transportation applications. The processing architecture couldn't be modified for weapons use without completely rebuilding the core systems. Elena nodded, her confidence in my assessment evident. That's what makes this investigation suspicious. Someone with detailed knowledge of our technology convinced EU regulators that legitimate transportation research poses a military threat. The investigation consumed the next several weeks, requiring detailed documentation of every aspect of our quantum computing development. Elena and I worked late into many evenings, reviewing technical specifications and preparing presentations that would demonstrate the peaceful applications of our research. Sophia often joined us in Elena's home office, doing homework while listening to our discussions with the focused attention she applied to everything involving advanced technology. One evening, as we reviewed patent applications for the 100th time, Sophia looked up from her algebra homework with a thoughtful expression. "Mama Elena, Papa, what if the person trying to stop your cars isn't doing it because they want to steal your inventions?" Elena and I exchanged glances, both recognizing that Sophia's questions often led to insights we hadn't considered. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Well, if someone wanted to steal your quantum computers, they would try to do it secretly, right? But making a big investigation that everyone can see seems like they want to stop you from using the inventions at all." The observation was simple but profound, forcing us to reconsider our assumptions about the European investigation. If the goal wasn't corporate espionage but complete suppression of our technology, the list of potential suspects expanded significantly. "Sophia's right," I said slowly. "This feels more like sabotage than theft. Someone wants to prevent autonomous racing technology from being developed at all." Elena's expression shifted to the analytical intensity I'd learned to recognize when she was processing new strategic information. If autonomous racing succeeds, it proves that self-driving cars can handle complex, high-speed situations safely. That would accelerate public acceptance of autonomous vehicles across the entire industry. And someone with investments in traditional automotive technology might want to delay that transition, I concluded, understanding the implications. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sophia, researching international patent disputes for a school project on intellectual property rights, discovered a pattern in recent EU investigations that none of our legal team had noticed. Companies developing autonomous vehicle technology had been targeted by similar investigations over the past 18 months, each case initiated by complaints from the same anonymous source. "Look at this," Sophia announced during dinner, her tablet displaying a chart she'd created, showing the connection between various investigations. Every company that got in trouble was working on self-driving cars, and they all got reported by someone called European Citizens for Transportation Safety, but nobody knows who that really is. Elena studied Sophia's research with growing amazement. "Sweetheart, this is remarkable detective work. James has been trying to identify the source of our complaint for weeks." Within 24 hours, Elena's investigators had traced European Citizens for Transportation Safety, to a shell organization funded by traditional automotive manufacturers who viewed autonomous vehicles as an existential threat to their business models. The revelation transformed the EU investigation from a regulatory compliance issue into a clear case of anti-competitive market manipulation. The vindication felt satisfying, but the experience reminded me that Elena's success would always attract enemies willing to use increasingly sophisticated methods to undermine her achievements. As we celebrated the resolution of the European crisis with dinner at Sophia's favorite restaurant, I found myself wondering what challenges would emerge next. The answer came sooner than expected. 3 months later, Elena received a call that would test our family in ways none of us anticipated. Her father, whom she'd mentioned only briefly during our courtship, had suffered a major heart attack and was requesting to see her after nearly a decade of estrangement. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Elena admitted as we sat in our living room that evening, Sophia asleep upstairs after an exhausting day of science fair, judging where her magnetic levitation project had won first place in the engineering category. "What caused the estrangement?" I asked gently, sensing that Elena's relationship with her father involved pain she'd never fully shared. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the garden where Sophia had first suggested. "We become a family. My father built his automotive empire through methods that weren't always ethical. When I started Apex, I made it clear that I wouldn't follow his example. He saw my commitment to ethical business practices as a personal rejection of everything he'd accomplished." The revelation added new context to Elena's fierce dedication to doing business the right way, even when it would have been easier or more profitable to cut corners. Her ethical standards weren't just business philosophy. They were a conscious rejection of her father's legacy. "Do you want to see him?" I asked. "I don't know. Part of me feels obligated because he's dying. But part of me remembers all the times he told me that compassion was weakness in the business world." Sophia's voice came from the stairway, where she'd apparently been listening with the stealth skills she'd developed for gathering information about adult conversations. "Mama Elena, sometimes people say mean things when they're scared or hurt. Maybe your papa is different now because he's sick." Elena looked at Sophia with the mixture of gratitude and amazement that had become familiar since our daughter started, offering wisdom beyond her years. "You think I should give him a chance?" Sophia nodded seriously. "Papa always says that helping people is the most important job anyone can have. Maybe your papa needs help learning how to be better." 2 days later, we flew to Detroit to visit Elena's father, Richard Castillo, recovering from surgery in a private medical facility. Sophia brought her tablet and a book on automotive history, while Elena carried herself with the same composed professionalism she used in business negotiations. Richard, still weakened from a recent heart attack, possessed a commanding presence that explained Elena's natural authority, though his seemed rooted in intimidation and control. "So you're the mechanic who married my daughter," he sighed, his tone dismissive. "I'm the engineer who fell in love with your daughter," I replied evenly, refusing to be diminished, earning a sharper look from him. When Sophia stepped forward and declared, "Papa is the smartest engineer in the world, and he taught me that being kind is more important than being powerful," his facade cracked. Over the next 3 days, conversation shifted from business to personal matters, Elena sharing our life and Sophia's achievements, Richard speaking of regrets and missed opportunities. The turning point came when Sophia asked about his early days in the automotive industry, revealing a passion for engineering long buried under ambition. "I made choices that put profit over people," he admitted. Elena reached for his hand and offered him a consulting role at Apex if he could work within ethical guidelines. 6 months later, he joined as a senior advisor, struggling at times to adjust. But Sophia's presence reminded him that success was measured by the impact on future generations, not quarterly profits. A year after his heart attack, he founded the Castillo Foundation for Ethical Business Practices, funding scholarships for underprivileged children pursuing automotive engineering. Watching Elena work alongside her father, their relationship rebuilt on shared values, I marveled at how far we'd come since the night a broken Aston Martin brought us together. Sophia, now 12 and designing systems that challenged professional engineers, often reminded us that families are chosen as much as they're born. One evening, while we worked on a propulsion design in her workshop, she asked if our family would keep growing. When I asked why, she said, "Well, we got Mama Elena, then Grandpa Richard, and now Mrs. Gonzalez says she thinks of us as family. I just wondered if there are more people out there who need us." The question encapsulated Sophia's generous heart and Elena's influence on our understanding of what family could mean. We'd learned that love didn't diminish when shared with more people. It multiplied, creating connections that strengthened everyone involved. That evening, as Elena and I sat on our back porch watching Sophia test her latest invention in the garden, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had transformed a struggling single father and a lonely CEO into something none of us could have imagined alone. "No regrets?" Elena asked, reading my contemplative mood with the intuition that had developed between us over 3 years of partnership. "Only that it took us so long to find each other," I replied, pulling her closer as Sophia's latest creation hovered successfully 3 feet above the ground, powered by principles that would probably revolutionize transportation within the next decade. Our daughter's excited cheers filled the evening air as she documented her successful test, already planning improvements and applications that would benefit people around the world. Watching her, I realized that our greatest achievement wasn't the business success or technological breakthroughs we'd accomplished together. Our greatest achievement was raising a daughter who understood that intelligence without compassion was incomplete, that success without ethics was hollow, and that the most important innovations were those that made life better for others. As the sun set behind our garden, illuminating Sophia's floating prototype and highlighting Elena's proud smile, I knew that whatever challenges the future held, we would face them as we had everything else since that first night together, as a family built on love, trust, and the shared belief that helping others was indeed the most important job anyone could have. 10 years had passed since that stormy night when a broken Aston Martin had changed the trajectory of 3 lives forever. Sofia Rivera Castillo, now 22 and fresh from completing dual PhDs in quantum engineering and sustainable transportation systems, stood at the podium of the Geneva International Motor Show, preparing to unveil technology that would fundamentally alter humanity's relationship with transportation. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as automotive journalists, industry executives, and environmental scientists filled every seat. Elena sat in the front row, her silver-streaked hair elegant in the morning light, her eyes bright with pride as she watched our daughter prepare to present research that had occupied the past 4 years of her academic career. Beside Elena, Richard Castillo leaned forward with the focused attention of someone who had learned to appreciate innovation driven by purpose rather than mere profit. I remained backstage, preferring my familiar role as the technical consultant, who enabled others to shine while avoiding the spotlight myself. At 48, I had grown comfortable with being known as the engineering genius behind Apex Automotive Group's revolutionary breakthroughs, rather than seeking public recognition for achievements that felt most meaningful when they improved lives rather than enhanced reputations. Sophia's presentation began with a holographic display that materialized above the stage, showing a 3-dimensional model of Earth surrounded by transportation networks that pulsed with clean energy flows. Her voice carried Elena's natural authority, combined with my systematic approach to complex problems, creating a speaking style that commanded attention while remaining accessible to diverse audiences. Transportation accounts for 24% of global carbon emissions. Sophia began, her presentation weaving together environmental science, quantum physics, and social justice with the sophisticated understanding that had made her the youngest person ever admitted to the Advanced Transportation Institute at MIT. But what if every vehicle on Earth could operate with zero emissions while actually improving air quality through atmospheric carbon capture? The technology Sophia revealed that morning represented the culmination of everything Elena and I had worked toward since our partnership began. Quantum-powered atmospheric processors integrated into vehicle propulsion systems would transform cars, trucks, trains, and aircraft into mobile environmental restoration units, removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere while generating clean energy for transportation and urban infrastructure. The implications were staggering. Within 20 years, widespread adoption of Sophia's atmospheric processors could reverse decades of transportation-related environmental damage while creating economic opportunities for communities worldwide. Developing nations could leapfrog traditional automotive infrastructure entirely, building transportation networks that improved rather than degraded their environmental conditions. As Sophia fielded questions from the international audience, demonstrating technical mastery that impressed experts who had spent decades studying transportation systems, I felt a profound sense of completion. The little girl who had once asked why her papa didn't tell stories about his racing days had grown into a young woman whose innovations would impact billions of lives. After the presentation, Elena and I walked through Geneva's historic district, while Sophia participated in a symposium with environmental ministers from 12 countries. The afternoon sun illuminated cobblestone streets that had witnessed centuries of human progress, and I found myself reflecting on how individual choices could ripple across generations to create change beyond what anyone might imagine. "She's going to transform the world," Elena said, her voice filled with the wonder of a mother watching her child exceed every expectation. "She already has," I replied, thinking of the young engineers from disadvantaged backgrounds who had received scholarships through the foundation Richard had established, many of whom were now developing their own breakthrough technologies. Sophia's influence extends far beyond her inventions. She's inspiring an entire generation to believe that engineering should serve humanity's highest aspirations. Elena smiled, the expression carrying memories of countless family dinners where Sophia had posed questions that challenged assumptions about progress, success, and responsibility. "Do you remember when she was 12 and asked why we couldn't make cars that cleaned the air instead of polluting it? And you told her that maybe she would be the one to figure out how," I recalled. I don't think either of us imagined she would actually do it before her 23rd birthday. We paused outside a small cafe where we had shared coffee during our honeymoon 15 years earlier, the memory bringing warmth that had only deepened with time. Our marriage had evolved from the initial partnership born of crisis into something richer and more complex than either of us had thought possible. When we first acknowledged our feelings in the garden behind our old house, Elena had grown into a role that extended far beyond CEO of Apex Automotive Group. Her ethical approach to business had influenced an entire generation of entrepreneurs, while her commitment to environmental restoration had made her a respected voice in international climate policy discussions. Yet she remained the woman who helped Sophia with homework and insisted on family dinners where business was prohibited from conversation. My own journey had surprised me most of all. The former racing engineer who had chosen quiet obscurity as a neighborhood mechanic had somehow become one of the most influential voices in sustainable transportation development. Universities sought my consultation on quantum propulsion research. Governments requested my analysis of automotive policy proposals, and fellow engineers credited my work with inspiring breakthrough approaches to complex engineering challenges. But the achievements that mattered most remained intimate and personal: Sophia's intellectual curiosity and moral clarity, Elena's trust and partnership in both business and family matters, Richard's transformation from ruthless corporate manipulator into a grandfather who taught Sophia chess while discussing ethical, decision-making frameworks, Mrs. Gonzalez's inclusion in our family gatherings, where her practical wisdom balanced our theoretical discussions. The quiet life I had once sought for Sophia and myself had evolved into something I never could have anticipated. Yet every major decision had been guided by the same principle that had led me to help a stranded motorist on a rainy highway 15 years ago. When presented with opportunities to help others, we chose service over self-interest. That evening, the 3 generations of our family gathered for dinner at a restaurant overlooking Lake Geneva, the conversation flowing between Sophia's excitement about collaboration offers from environmental organizations worldwide, Elena's strategic planning for implementing atmospheric processor technology across Apex's global operations, and Richard's updates on foundation projects that we're creating educational opportunities for young people in developing nations. "I've been thinking about what comes next," Sophia announced as we shared dessert, her tone carrying the thoughtful consideration she applied to all major life decisions. "The atmospheric processor technology is proven, but implementation will require infrastructure development in communities that lack resources for traditional automotive manufacturing." Elena leaned forward with the focused attention she brought to all business discussions. "Are you thinking about establishing regional development centers?" "More than that," Sophia replied, her eyes bright with the vision that had driven her research. "I want to create a global cooperative where communities can license the technology for free, manufacturing atmospheric processors locally using materials and workers from their own regions. Instead of centralized production that benefits wealthy corporations, we could distribute both the environmental benefits and economic opportunities to places that need them most." The proposal represented a radical departure from traditional business models, prioritizing global equity over maximum profit in ways that would have seemed naive to most corporate executives. But sitting at that table with 3 generations of family members who had all learned to measure success by positive impact rather than financial accumulation, Sophia's vision felt both practical and inevitable. The foundation could provide initial funding for infrastructure development, Richard offered, his suggestion carrying the authority of someone who had learned to channel business expertise toward humanitarian goals. "We have relationships with development banks and environmental organizations that could accelerate implementation." Elena nodded slowly, her strategic mind already analyzing operational challenges and opportunity structures. Apex could contribute manufacturing expertise and supply chain coordination without retaining ownership of intellectual property. We maintain our commitment to environmental restoration while ensuring that communities retain control over their economic development. As I listened to my family plan ways to revolutionize global transportation while prioritizing social justice, I marveled at how far we had all traveled from that first meeting in a parking garage. Sophia had inherited Elena's strategic brilliance and my systematic approach to complex problems, but she had added something uniquely her own, an instinctive understanding that technological advancement meant nothing unless it served the well-being of all humanity. The implementation of Sophia's global cooperative took 3 years to establish, requiring negotiations with governments, environmental organizations, and communities across 6 continents. Elena and I supported the project through Apex's resources and the Foundation's funding, but Sophia led every aspect of development with the diplomatic skills that reminded me constantly of her mother's influence and the technical precision that reflected principles I had tried to teach her. The first atmospheric processor manufacturing facility opened in rural Kenya, where local workers assembled components designed by Sophia while receiving technical training that would enable them to establish additional facilities throughout East Africa. Similar operations launched simultaneously in Guatemala, Bangladesh, and rural regions of Eastern Europe, each adapted to local conditions while maintaining the environmental effectiveness that made the technology revolutionary. Within 5 years, atmospheric processor vehicles were operating on every continent, removing millions of tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere annually while providing transportation solutions that communities could afford and maintain. Independently, the global cooperative had created hundreds of thousands of jobs in regions previously excluded from technological advancement, while proving that innovation driven by social responsibility could be both environmentally effective and economically sustainable. The success of Sophia's project attracted international recognition that she handled with the same gracious humility Elena had always demonstrated when receiving awards for business achievements. The United Nations invited her to address climate conferences, engineering societies offered honorary memberships, and universities sought her leadership for research programs that combined technical innovation with social justice advocacy. But the recognition that meant most to Sophia came from communities where her atmospheric processors had created opportunities for young people to pursue education and economic advancement while contributing to environmental restoration. Letters arrived regularly from students whose families had benefited from cooperative manufacturing jobs, many expressing interest in engineering careers inspired by Sophia's example. One particular letter, from a 16-year-old girl in rural Guatemala whose mother assembled atmospheric processors for the local cooperative, contained a question that brought tears to Sophia's eyes when she shared it with Elena and me during Sunday dinner at our family home. "Sophia," the letter read, "my teacher says that engineering is about solving problems that make life better for people. You solved the problem of cars that hurt the environment, but you also solved the problem of my community not having good jobs for people with technical skills. How do I learn to think about problems the way you do, so I can help solve problems for other people too?" Sophia's response became the foundation for her next major project, a global mentorship network connecting young people interested in engineering with professionals committed to socially responsible innovation. The program paired students from disadvantaged communities with engineers who had demonstrated commitment to using technical skills for humanitarian purposes, providing guidance that extended beyond academic instruction to encompass ethical decision-making, frameworks, and community engagement strategies. Elena and I served as founding advisors for the mentorship network, drawing on decades of experience navigating the intersection of technical innovation and social responsibility. Richard contributed strategic planning expertise while sharing stories about the personal costs of prioritizing profit over purpose, lessons that helped young engineers understand why ethical considerations should guide technical choices. The network grew rapidly, connecting thousands of mentoring relationships across cultural and economic boundaries, while maintaining focus on engineering applications that addressed poverty, environmental degradation, and social inequality. Participants developed solutions ranging from water purification systems, powered by renewable energy, to communication technologies that connected isolated communities with educational resources and healthcare information. As I watched Sophia's mentorship network create opportunities for the next generation of socially conscious engineers, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought our family to this moment. The quiet life I had once sought had evolved into something more complex and demanding than I could have imagined. Yet every challenge had been guided by principles that remained constant: compassion for others, commitment to ethical choices, and belief that individual actions could create positive change far beyond what any single person might accomplish alone. Elena, now in her 50s and recognized internationally as a pioneer in sustainable business practices, often spoke about the importance of maintaining perspective about success and achievement. We measure our impact not by what we accomplish for ourselves, she would tell young entrepreneurs seeking her mentorship, but by how our choices create opportunities for others to achieve their own dreams. The philosophy that guided Elena's business leadership reflected lessons learned through our partnership, but it also honored the memory of Isabella's influence on both Sophia and me. the kindergarten teacher who had taught children to believe in their own potential, continued to shape our family's understanding of what truly mattered, even 15 years after her death. Sophia, now 27 and leading environmental engineering conferences while managing a global cooperative that employed over 50,000 people in 38 countries, had grown into a woman who embodied the best qualities Elena and I had tried to model. Her technical brilliance was matched by emotional intelligence that enabled her to build consensus among diverse stakeholders, while her commitment to social justice ensured that innovation served humanity's most vulnerable populations. On a warm September evening, as 3 generations of our family gathered for dinner in the garden, where Sophia had first suggested that Elena and I should acknowledge our feelings for each other, I found myself overwhelmed by gratitude for the unexpected path that had brought us together. The conversation that night ranged from Sophia's latest research into atmospheric restoration technologies to Elena's strategic planning for establishing educational partnerships in emerging markets, from Richard's updates on foundation projects to Mrs. Gonzalez's stories about her grandson's acceptance into engineering school with scholarship support from the Mentorship Network. As the sun set behind flowers that Sophia and Elena had planted together over the years, illuminating faces that carried evidence of love, purpose, and shared commitment to making the world better, I realized that the greatest engineering project any of us had undertaken was the creation of our family itself. We had started as strangers brought together by circumstances beyond our control. A broken car, a lonely CEO, a struggling single father, and a curious child whose questions challenged adults to think differently about what was possible. Through daily choices to prioritize love over fear, service over self-interest, and hope over cynicism, we had built something stronger and more beautiful than any technology we might ever develop. The little girl who had once asked why her papa didn't tell stories about his racing days had grown into a woman whose own story was inspiring millions of people to believe that engineering could serve humanity's highest aspirations. The CEO who had once worked alone in her office late into the night now led a company that proved ethical business practices could generate both environmental restoration and economic prosperity. The grandfather who had once prioritized profit over people had become a philanthropist whose foundation created opportunities for young people to pursue dreams their communities had never thought possible. And the neighborhood mechanic who had chosen quiet anonymity to protect his daughter's stability had discovered that some stories were worth telling after all, not because they glorified the storyteller, but because they demonstrated how individual choices to help others could ripple across generations to create change beyond what anyone might imagine. As Sophia shared exciting news about collaboration invitations from organizations working on ocean cleanup technologies and renewable energy infrastructure, I understood that our family story was far from complete. The next chapters would be written by young engineers inspired by Sophia's example, by communities empowered through the global cooperative's economic opportunities, and by the countless individuals whose lives had been touched by our collective commitment to using whatever gifts we possessed in service of others. The broken Aston Martin that had brought Elena and me together 15 years ago had been repaired with temporary solutions that got her safely home that night. But the relationships that began in crisis had been built with the patient work of daily choices, creating bonds strong enough to support dreams that none of us could have achieved alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.